What is up, people? Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So, this morning we have a new and improved little intro video. I added some nifty little animations to it and everything. It's getting to the point where I'm almost tired of hearing the song because I've heard it so many times now. But let me know what you guys think. I've got a couple other things I want to add to it, but I can only get so much done in a given day. So, welcome this morning to the ASTROLABE. This is our new morning. Every morning, Monday to Friday, I'm going to be hopping on here and sharing with you guys some of the interesting things that I've found as I've scrolled across Twitter or wandered my way around YouTube, and try to keep you guys. I know some of you guys don't have time to spend all this. Maybe you're interested in all the different things that are going on, but you don't have time to go through all of it. And it just so happens that over the course of the last several years, I've basically lined myself up to where I kind of am the conduit of all the things that are happening. I don't have to work to go find it. I just kind of see it naturally. So I'm taking whatever is being dumped into me by the great cavernous maw of the internet and passing it on to you guys. So it seems like people are enjoying this format so far. So we're going to keep doing it. One thing that has been interesting, I don't know exactly why, if it's just a coincidence, but every single stream that I have done this week has been immediately demonetized as soon as the stream is over. I don't know if there's a particular subject that I've been touching on. I've definitely talked about certain things more than I've done other subjects from past streams, but for whatever reason, it's all getting demonetized, and it's related to other videos, to streaming other people's videos and their copyright claims on them. But I've done streaming of other people's videos a lot, and often they'll get limited monetization, but they won't be straight up demonetized. So perhaps this is signaling that I've gotten on the radar of the powers that be, and they're starting to apply their soft power pressure. Well, it's not going to work. I'm just going to keep doing it. My guess is that probably it just so happens that the clips that I've happened to play this week have just so happened to be all ones that got demonetized. If this continues for another week or two, then I'll start picking up on there's something else going on. Tricky Woo says BLM Tifa types reporting probably. Well, interestingly, I haven't really pissed any of them off recently, but there is another group that I have pissed off who tends to behave the same way. I'll leave you to draw that conclusion yourself. What's up, Euthanasia? Good to see you here. Patrick Spellman. We got some names I recognize. We got some names I don't recognize. So welcome to all of you. We here are King Pilled. And if you would like to become one of the King Pilled, if you'd like to support the show, given the fact that we can't monetize otherwise, then you can become a member. You could join to become a member of the King Pilled on the King Pill Show YouTube channel. $5 a month will get you basically nothing except you get to say that you're a member of the King Pilled, and you get your little name in green, and you get a little picture next to it, like Euthanasia. You can see Euthanasia as a member. Also, if you would like to support the show in other ways, then you can join the King Pilled Discord channel, and for that you get a lot. It's definitely more expensive than the YouTube channel, but you get a lot more value for it, I would say. So kingpilled.com will get you there. There's a great group of people in there. I'm getting the notifications popping in right now. Apparently, not every single of the 100 or so people in there is actively sitting and watching the show. They're in there talking to themselves, even though I gave them a notification to come hang out. Patrick Spellman says, what's the price of the Discord at now? So entry level is $29 a month. There's $29, $49, and $99. And for that, you'll get this entire group of people that are all very like-minded. We're all sharing info. I glean a lot of the stuff that I get for the show. I glean from the Discord channel and the great conversations that we have in there. But then we've got channels dedicated to homesteading, channels dedicated to fitness and health and nutrition, channels dedicated to grifting. And let's see, what are some of the other ones? We've got an alcohol and nicotine channel. We've got a channel for the nerds for all things programming and such. We have a channel for finance, talking personal finance or investments or crypto. And that one is Dave Ramsey Sucks is the name of the channel. That gives you an idea of where we stand on that. So if you would like to be a part of that community, we just had our first, that I'm aware of, our first hiring that happened as a consequence of the community. that just came across my desk yesterday, so that's good to know. That sort of thing is happening in there, and we'd like to continue building and expanding and creating more opportunities for more people. Good morning, Taylor Brown. There's the hype man for the Discord himself. If you have any other questions about the Discord throughout the stream, you can probably hit up Taylor and he'll tell you everything he knows, which is most of it. He's one of our most active members, and we appreciate him very much. So, what's going on today? Let's see. I've got, as per usual, I've got a rather funny clip to start us off. Don't think I'm going to get demonetized for this clip. We'll see. And man, I just realized now I should have worn my Marshawn Lynch hoodie I was wearing the other day because Marshawn Lynch is in this clip. Let's get this shared. And the clip yesterday that I tried to post that I tried to play that wouldn't work because I didn't have it in Chrome. I haven't had time to go figure out exactly how to do that, so you'll just have to wait for that one for another time. Oh yeah, Xavier says the people have been swapping sourdough recipes in there and talking about how to get the microplastics out of your balls. And it is not exclusively men. We have a small, loyal contingent of based trad moms in there. And they even have their own channel to talk to each other. So what's funny is that they don't use it, but it's there. So yeah, if you'd like to join kingpill.com, that'll get you in there. And Taylor can show you all of his peppers that he's growing. He is the proud papa of many little jalapeno peppers. All right, so says here, don't sign up for Beast Mode's football camp if you're sensitive. There are coaches that will cuss your kid out. Now, this whole interaction is there's much we can glean from this, but most of all, it's just funny. So let's watch it here.
All right, that's okay. No, my son's in tears. It's not okay. I didn't say that. Maybe you should just let him know. Because they're all in tears.
Is there a man here with you?
Is there a man here with you?
I do. I cuss a lot. I cuss in front of
I actually do.
look, I cuss a lot.
Every one of them's
All right,
fine.
that's okay.
No, my son's in tears. It's not okay.
Is there a man here with you? Is not a man here with you?
But I'm here. What does that matter?
Okay, I'm
My
gonna
son
speak to a
is leaving.
man.
I don't care. It's my son.
Tell them
Oh, he's involved here too. They all said
But I'll tell them that if they're not doing what they need to do, then yes, there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
If it takes that amount of time for when I tell a kid to do something and they're not doing what they're supposed to do, then there is consequences, like push-ups, like running laps,
Like telling them to get away from your drill.
like telling them to get out of my drill if they're not participating,
Get out of your
doing right,
drill.
get the out of my drill,
I'm not even
get the out of my drill, or whatever it takes to get my drill.
All right. There was someone that was in the chat yesterday that was asking what longhouse means. This right here is the longhouse. In real time, we're seeing it happen. So Marshawn Lynch, obviously, I guess I gotta the guys who don't sports ball here. Marshawn Lynch is a famed NFL football player, renowned for his tough, relentless running style. He has multiple long touchdowns where as he scored, he turned and jumped backwards into the end zone, grabbing his dick, and has never really been one for the conventions of polite society. What's interesting is you get the impression that he's a total meathead, but he's actually very, very intelligent. He's a very savvy investor. His entire NFL career, he never spent a penny of the money he made through the NFL. He lived off of his endorsements and sponsorships, and he owns multiple businesses, and he's very active in actual community work. He's like one of the guys that will actually go down and walk around on the street and press the flesh with people and talk to them, and he knows them. They're his people. He's a fantastic man. So one of these things is he has these camps for kids to teach them how to play football, and he's targeting the inner city kids and trying to pull them out and trying to give them some sort of purpose so they're not getting involved in gang activity. And again, he's not a guy who's known for his polite sensibilities. His interviews are infamous. He has dropped the F-bomb on live TV many times. And this is just him. This is just Marshawn being Marshawn. He's going to do his thing. And he generally is fairly non-controversial. He's just kind of like, he's an introvert. He's just going to do his own thing. But if you really back him into a corner and you press him, then he bites back. And you can see that here. He's not like, sorry, man, we could go get a refund, whatever. He's not. Can I talk to a man? Is there a man here that I have a conversation? This conversation with a woman is not going to end well. There's no way we're ever going to see eye to eye. This is a completely pointless waste of time. Can I talk to a man? And no, he cannot talk to a man. Okay, you can see he's, man, damn it. There's no man around. I can't talk to a man. So he's like, all right, we're digging in now. Yes, I run a football camp for boys. And when these boys come to my football camp, they get treated like men, because this is what young boys need. Young boys need to be treated like men. We're not going to coddle their sensibilities. I'm going to tell you like it is. If you're loafing in my drill, I'm going to tell you to get the fuck out of my drill. And I think this is probably kids like, I don't know, 8, 10, something like that. But he's starting them early. I'm not going to coddle you. I'm not going to baby you. You're going to get pushed hard. You're going to get pushed until you break, because that's what you need as a man. You need to be pushed until you break. So you recognize your own limitations, and then you have an incentive to push beyond them. This is how you grow. It's the basics of like growing musculature. But here's the women, well-meaning women. This woman's like, well, I don't want my son to grow up looking like you. I don't want my son to be the guy who's known for his dreads and his tattoos and walking around cussing at people. I don't want that for my son. So this is a very noble, compassionate, motherly instinct. You made my baby cry. How fucking dare you make my baby cry? This is my baby. Don't make him cry. I'm coming after you. See, a man in a situation like this would be like, listen, motherfucker, we go over, maybe punch him, they get in a fist fight or whatever, and then the guy's going to move on with his life. Hey, get my kid out of here. My kid's not going here anymore. The woman, on the other hand, is going to make it her life's mission to absolutely ruin and destroy him to whatever extent that she can. She's going to squeeze every last little bit of juice out of this she possibly can. And like, which do you think ultimately sets men up for success more? Seeing their dad behave that way, which I wouldn't necessarily endorse the dad behaving that way, but if you have to choose between the I guess like lowbrow sort of lizard brain masculine behavior or the lowbrow lizard brain feminine behavior, the latter is going to be much worse for a young man's psychology. Young men need to be pushed out into environments like this. They need to experience being part of a team and being crammed into the structure of the team, regardless of how they feel about it, submitting themselves to the good of the team and learning to operate as a team. Young men need this. These constraints of society that are toward respectability and all that, these are good and they have their place, but the foundation has to be there. And part of that foundation is young boys need to have experienced older men who police them, who slap them down when they're out of place. Whether you're loafing or acting out, in either case, young men need older men to keep them in line. And this applies all the way throughout life. Adult men need elderly men to keep them in line. Elderly men need more elderly men to keep them in line. You're passing on the wisdom of the generations from man to man, which is how it's passed down. And men can only really communicate with men in this way. Women just can't be involved. As soon as women get involved, it changes the dynamic. KJ says, those kids are likely 12 at an age where they can handle this kind of pushback from an authority figure. I mean, come on, you're paying for your sons to be coddled? Might as well keep them at home. See, not all women. Not all women. Kate's one of the good ones. She gets it. They exist out there, boys. You can find them. They do exist. And if you can't find one, you can make one. You have the power to do that. You just have to recognize it. What does Colin have to say? He says, good morning, here I am. You really wrecked my brain yesterday with the last segment. Had some time to contemplate not rooting for my enemy's downfall. Lord have mercy on us all. Lord have mercy indeed. I'm glad that affected you the same way. Because, yeah, I didn't really know how it was going to be received when I shared it. Some of the comments on it are like, oh, he's a terrible person. How he committed suicide. He's burning in hell, yada, yada, yada. And then there was other people who were treating him as a hero. And I'm like, he's not a hero. There's something heroic about what he did, but he's not a hero. How do we handle someone like that? All I can think of is pray for him. Pray for him. Justify their sins, allow them to spotlight your own, and experience that humility. Josiah says this mother is as good as her man. That's a very good point. These women who are here harassing Marshawn Lynch like this, especially given the context, like imagine being the husband of one of these women and seeing a video going viral of your wife shrieking and nagging at Marshawn Lynch. Now your wife is the infamous obnoxious woman. No man wants that. That's a judgment on him. He's the one who allowed that. It says a lot about the state of things at home. If his wife feels like she's entitled to go out and behave that way. This ties into another clip that I have here. I know some of you in the audience are not going to like seeing this clip. I'm going to wait for just a minute to share it, but it involves a guy that I know many of you are not exactly the biggest fans of, and I could kind of take him or leave him, but we'll get to him in just a minute. First of all, here is a white pill. We've talked about Eric Prince here on the show. We've talked about the PayPal mafia and this evident rise of some sort of counter elite who seem to have a really good sense for what time it is, and actually have some of the I guess the cojones or the sack to do something about it. One of these people is Eric Prince, and he's been doing a lot of very interesting things lately. Good buddy Pete Quinones has been keeping an eye on him as well. He's saying some interesting stuff. He's got his podcast. He's got his phone, and I know the cynics all say, oh, he's just trying to pitch his phone. Nah. He wants to pitch his phone because he genuinely thinks that it's a solution for certain things. But he's done many long-form interviews now, and you can literally listen to him describe to you what he thinks the problems are and how what he thinks needs to be done in broad strokes to fix it. And most simply, it would be get the adults back in the room. That would be the most simple, straightforward thing. Get the adults back in the room. We're dealing with civilizational level questions and problems and crises that cannot be subjected to the whims of all these little petty feminized tyrants. They're steaming us off a cliff, and we can't let it stand. I don't care what your partisan inclinations are. We're steaming off a cliff, and someone needs to grab hold of the steering wheel. Now, it's a bit of a prisoner's dilemma here, because the nature of the beast is if individual people stick their heads out, they're more likely to get knocked off. But there's going to be a tipping point, and we're watching that tipping point rising. It's coming. It's getting closer. Pretty soon, there's going to be sufficient people who all recognize. It's kind of like maybe you got like a mob of people standing outside some like fortified castle. And individual people who try to rally the crowd and they go run out ahead and they jump on the castle ramparts, they get speared to death. They get hot wax poured on them, or oil or whatever. Rocks dropped on their heads. To ultimately take over the castle, what's required is all of the people simultaneously together all have to rush at once. So instead of one person going first and other people following them, it's got to be everyone makes the decision at one time. How do you coordinate? How do you do that? Especially when the enemy is like actively listening to you. How do you coordinate without explicitly coordinating? Well, it just so happens that this enemy also has a tendency to get themselves completely out over their skis and try to wage war with everyone all over across the world all at the same time. And one of the things that they war upon is competence itself. So they're actively making themselves worse while they're trying to fight everyone all at the same time and trying to spin all of these hats. It's like they're spinning all of these hats while they're getting worse and worse at spinning hats. And this is allowing, first there was little toe holds. Those toe holds widened into footholds, and now they're opening into entire doorways. And the crowd is just kind of standing there looking. There's doorways opening. Is it a trap? That's what the cynics say. The cynics say, oh, it's bait. It's a trap. They're trying to suck you in and make you part of them. Maybe. But if the right number of people and the right quality of people at the right time step through that doorway, you get the opportunity to test their bluff. And perhaps, or to call their bluff. And perhaps when you call it, you find out it was actually a bluff. I think this sort of thing is fascinating. This is like, it's like watching history happen in real time. You're watching a necrotic regime trying to project power that it doesn't have, and individual members, because this actually goes on the flip side as well. Part of the regime's claim to power is their claim of universal moral authority and the impression that it's an agglomeration of everyone all acting together at once. It's a united will. But as individual members of their mob begin starting to act alone or doing things that other members of the regime don't want them to do, like actually prosecuting and convicting Trump. There was a lot of people who would be considered part of the regime who didn't want that to happen for various reasons. Whether it's a matter of principle or it's simply pragmatic, like we're moving too fast at once. For whatever reason, the conviction of Trump was one of the most preeminent examples of the regime coalition beginning to fracture. The ruling against Elon, claiming his compensation package was illegitimate. That's another big one. These things are beginning to pile up where you can see the spirit of the regime possesses some people more than others. Those some people, there's probably a Pareto distribution, those some people who are possessed more than others are beginning to act more and more like rogue agents. And the people who have pledged to support them are sort of going through the motions because they have to, but they really don't want to. And they're waiting for somebody to give them an alternative. I tweeted yesterday that, so here, the thing on the screen. So Eric Prince is one of these people. He's been a regime guy. He's been influential and crucial, essential to the regime. He's also been personally crushed and humiliated and slapped in the face by the regime. So he's got a bone to pick. I opened up Twitter yesterday and look at this. I see an Eric Prince tweet. Okay, never fall for the allure of affluenza. We suffer in the West from an overabundance of leisure, calories, and distraction. Our safe and comfortable lives can quickly be swept away. Stay vigilant. Protect your family you're related to and the one you choose daily. An interesting thing to say. Protect your family you're related to and the one you choose daily. You choose your family daily. That's an interesting thought. So he's got a quote here. I'm like, oh, this is an interesting quote. He says, I leave you with this great quote. Long periods of peace and quiet favor certain optical illusions. Among them is the assumption that the invulnerability of the home is founded upon the Constitution and safeguarded by it. In reality, it rests upon the father of the family who, accompanied by his sons, appears with the axe on the threshold of his dwelling. Ernst Jünger. Oh boy. So not only do we have Eric Prince getting more pointed and focused in his criticisms, he's Jünger posting. This is a white pill, boys. Eric Prince is Jünger posting. This trajectory should be very obvious. In fact, it's it's so obvious that I'm almost worrying about this trajectory progressing too far. Dark Enlightenment on Peak and Yonas said that he feels confident that he's going to wind up dying on the left because of how far the social response to the last 30 to 90 years, depending on how you want to break it up, the response to that is building and swelling. You can sense the tension and the pressure of that. And it's going to explode. The question is, to what extent, how far reaching, to what extent is it going to be contained by strong men? Because real masculine strength is not unhinged, rage-fueled aggression. That's actually the collapse of strong masculinity. Strong masculinity can contain that rage and direct it productively. Because if you're not directing it productively, you're just making things worse. You're just contributing to the very thing you claim to war against. I wasn't going to share this tweet, but I'll do it now. This is something I posted this morning. I was listening to a video by What If Alt Hist, and he was talking. It was his manifesto, which was it was interesting. He had some interesting thoughts. I I appreciate where he's trying to go with this. Maybe we'll have a conversation about that at some point. But it sparked this thought. I said, if you're pained by our social loss of the values of truth, beauty, and goodness, you must accept that the only way to repair this loss is by embodying and producing that which is true, beautiful, and good. It's like, if we don't have any water, then attacking the sand isn't going to do anything for you. If we don't have any water, we have to produce water. However we do that. Kind of a strained analogy, but I think it makes the point. There is nothing true, beautiful, or good about indulging one's own resentment and rage to demand truth, beauty, and goodness from other people. This is like distorted feminism manifesting in men. Such impulses simply magnify and proliferate the opposites of those values. Nobody likes to hear an angry man shouting and raging into the void. There's something that's kind of gross about it. It's impotent. It's weak. It's fragile. It doesn't motivate anyone to truth or beauty or goodness. In order to generate truth, beauty, and goodness, in order to try to balance these scales in society, the only thing we can do is produce it ourselves. I said this truth is both hard and simple. The measure of a man is his ability to confront that which is evil with truth, beauty, and goodness. Stupid frickin' autocorrect. I do a capital B and then it just destroys the ability to autocorrect the rest of the word. See, I'm not really afraid of AI taking over the world because it can't even get frickin' autocorrect right yet. It's a joke. Okay, so I need to pick up my train of thought that I had here. So Eric Prince is Junger posting, and in reality, the invulnerability of the home rests upon the father of the family, who, accompanied by his sons, appears with the axe on the threshold of his dwelling. So it's kind of like a quote from Jordan Peterson. He said something about like to be a strong man, or to be something about a strong man and dangerous or something like that. But basically, you need to be powerful. You need to be able to contain that power. The power cannot be greater than you. The power of the spirit that possesses you, that motivates you, must be contained by you. Otherwise, you're a flawed vessel. You're a fragile vessel that can't contain anything. So nobody wants to invest in someone who can't contain anything. By invest, I don't just mean money. I mean time, attention, value. So in order to be a strong vessel, you have to contain that power, and you have to direct it positively. I'm not just making a moral claim when I say that you have to embody the truth, the beauty, and the goodness yourself. That's the only way to combat it. I'm not making that as a moral claim, although it is a moral claim. I'm saying this is an objective description of reality. Truth and beauty and goodness are objectively real things that have an essence. They're not a subjective haze wafting around out there that you can sort of try to get close to. They're manifested in subjects. They're perceived by subjects, but ultimately they're objectively real. They're objectively real. That means you could think of it like there's an objective science to them. You can learn how they function, how they operate. You can study them as variables. That doesn't mean they're only variables, or that you should only study them or only relate to them in a quote unquote scientific manner, but you can. And so the characteristics, the fundamental innate characteristics of truth, beauty, and goodness are that if you're lacking it, the only way you can get more of it is if you produce it. Saying that somebody else is responsible for it is manifesting your own lack of truth, beauty, and goodness. Those other people are also responsible for it themselves, but that's a question between them and God. You got to resolve that question for yourself. So we've got a guy like Eric Prince who is signaling what time it is. He made an interesting comment when he was with Tucker Carlson. He said, speaking to the idea of how far along we are, and is anything revocable? Are we doomed to complete and total collapse? And he said no. The Josiah. He said, no, these sorts of things you can see throughout history that you can get really close to the brink of utter and complete collapse and things can be pulled back. He said something about like corrective events. They can be painful, but they're possible, and they're still possible. There are corrective events out there to be had, to be engaged with, manipulated, facilitated, that can pull us back from the brink of complete and total destruction and loss. They're going to be painful, of course. Paying your debts is painful, but we must pay these debts. That is the corrective event. The corrective event is when a sufficient number of men decide they're not going to wait around for somebody else to solve the problems. They're going to solve the problems by paying the debts. And in return for paying those debts, they're going to get the responsibility for them. And responsibility is power. If you pay off someone else's debts, you're saying, I take that debt as my responsibility. I'm the one who's going to pay that off. And if I pay that off, if I execute that responsibility, I will receive power in return for that. There's a price to power. You have to be willing to pay for it. And most men aren't. That's why we haven't had a corrective event. Because most men are waiting for somebody else to pay the debts and give them the power for doing so. This is the latent shit lib in even some of the most based right-wingers. They think that political power is something that they are owed as a birthright. Someone else should pay the debt that is owed, but they should get a fraction of that power. No. You get whatever fraction of the power you earn yourself through whatever debts you take on yourself and you pay off. This is true in a literal financial sense. This is true in a spiritual sense. There's a massive spiritual debt that needs to be paid, and we have to pay that ourselves through our own behavior, our own actions, the things we choose to invest ourselves in. It turns out Eric Prince is not the only guy talking along these lines. Good friend of the show, Meta Prime here, highlights this clip from Elon. He says, Elon just wants to build. He isn't exactly our guy, but he's definitely pissed at the same corrupt government you are. And this is all that matters. He's pissed at the same corrupt government we are. He wants to build beyond it. We want to build beyond it. We might disagree about which direction we want to build, but he wants to build one way and we can build the other way. Be fellow travelers to whatever extent we're going to be fellow travelers, and part ways and sort out that dispute later on. But for now, we have a common enemy. Here's what Elon says.
This is why they can't build. You know, in the West, I think we have created a regulatory gridlock where just almost everything is illegal. This is why they can't build a high-speed rail in California. They spent $7 billion, and there's a 1,600-foot section is all they have to show for it, and it doesn't even have rails on it. It's really, you know, too absurd for parody. Because large projects are essentially illegal in California and much of Europe and other countries. So there has to be some garbage collection process for removing rules and regulations in order for society to function and not to you know, get hardening of the arteries and just to the point where you can't do anything. You know, in the way
Elon just wants to build. The way he's seeing it is rules and regulations. He may not fully appreciate the deep spiritual underpinning of all of that, but he doesn't need to. We're not looking for the perfect embodiment of our will. We're looking for allies. We're looking for people who are willing to put down cover fire for us to take territory. And these guys are willing to do that. Maybe later on we'll fight with them over that territory, but I'd rather be in that position than where we are right now. Large projects are the lifeblood of men. Men need to be able to engage in large projects. They need to be able to cast a vision and pursue it and accomplish it, or die falling short, giving it their all. This is part of the masculine spirit that's been snuffed out by the longhouse that men allowed. Men facilitated the construction of the longhouse and let it trap them. So the only way out of it is going to be men navigating their way out of it. As long as you're begging for other men to do it for you, you're just part of the peanut gallery in the longhouse. You're still firmly, squarely within it. Joshua Ham says, it's freaky hard to be the first patriot, to be the first martyr, to be the first to charge the trench. However, once one person does it, it's exponentially easier for the second and again for the third. That's exactly true. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. Taylor Brown says, can you help explain the dying on the left comment? I haven't heard this, I don't think. What he means is there's going to be such a strong, violent reaction to all the degeneracy of the last several years, the last several decades, really, to the point where, I don't know, 20 years from now, Christian men are going to find themselves in the position of trying to contain the excesses of angry, bloodthirsty men. Those angry, bloodthirsty men are going to arise as a judgment from God on our nation, our society, our culture for allowing this degeneracy. God is the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end, the cause and the effect. When you experience the consequences of your actions, you're experiencing God. This is the vengeful son archetype that Jason has been talking about. And it's going to feel good. You're going to have a lot of men who feel gratified and make incredibly strong spiritual cases for engaging in what really is just wanton, bloodthirsty gratification of the passions. They'll be destroying their own souls in the process, and they won't be facilitating the construction of a new civilization. They'll just be prolonging the degeneracy and the decay. That degeneracy and decay is just going to take a slightly different aesthetic form than it has thus far. You're going to see the all-out total violence that's a consequence of the complete absence of feminine restraint upon men. This is where men are required to behave as both a man and a woman. They have to embody the masculine spirit in some cases and the feminine spirit in other cases. And for a man to properly embody the feminine spirit in the appropriate case is the ultimate of the spirit of masculinity. That's the wisdom. Knowing when you need to operate as a constraint, as a restraining force, as a balancing force. Or knowing when you need to break out of the boundaries and expand, push out onto the horizon. Both of these are masculine qualities, are necessary masculine qualities. And the true masculinity is having the wisdom to identify when one is required versus the other. So what he's saying when he says he's going to die on the left, he's using it as a figure of speech that basically he's going to be the one saying, guys, chill out. Like, we don't need more of them hanging from overpasses. That's not making things better. There's going to be a flip side reaction of violent rampaging through society, and we can't indulge in it, no matter how good it feels or no matter how justified we feel in it. Because again, we are devoted to the divine ideals of truth and beauty and goodness, and the God from whom they manifest. So that means we have to oppose it we have to oppose the deprivation of it in all of its forms. Whether that's coming from a perverted, feminine, long-housed, subversive spirit, or a bloodthirsty, savage, pagan, other type of destructive spirit. Neither one of those is going to build a civilization or a future for our children and ensure that they live long, productive lives where they get to explore and study the nature of God and make further discoveries beyond us. That's my goal. My goal is to set my son up to be able to do these types of things. To have great experiences with great people, explore the world, study nature, understand the rules and laws of its systems, and to set up a world for his own children to do the same. Josiah says, don't rely on a woman in your phone to correct you. Now I get it, Josiah. Josiah is notoriously one of the most difficult writers to read in casual back and forths. Every once in a while, he like makes an effort and he sits down and you could tell he went through and he fixed the typos and stuff. But he types like someone who doesn't use autocorrect. And now I understand this is his war against the Longhouse. Okay, let me see what some of you guys are saying here, and then we'll get to some of these other. Yes, I'm a hairy fuck. I've got some other clips to share with you guys. Let's see. Yeah, Elon is ridiculously pronatalist, and that's huge. We need more pronatalism. So talking about this vibe shift that's been happening, another good friend of the show, Charles Haywood, quoted someone I generally think is kind of a fruitcake, but he makes a good point every now and then. Cernovich says, in 2020, Logan Paul was doing a struggle session for Black Lives Matter. In 2024, he's at Mar-a-Lago. You can call him opportunistic, insincere, etc., which is true. The vibe shift is that real, though. From BLM to Papa T, the world moves fast, sometimes even for the better. I don't think he actually has the video of it here. Here's a screenshot of it. Trump and Logan Paul did a stare down, like a wrestling stare down, and then they had a big hug and everything. And what he's identifying here is what is popular, the sense that people have for what's the popular cutting edge thing. In 2020, it was Black Lives Matter. In 2024, it's going to Mar-a-Lago and staring down the president and having a big bro hug with him. The big orange bombastic goofball boomer president of ours. You could attribute that to whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is that it has changed. There is a change. And this change corresponds with a whole bunch of other changes, as we've documented with the PayPal mafia phenomenon. You see these guys like David Sachs, who are and Chamath Palihapitiya, who are going all out promoting Trump. And of course, I think they're promoting him for a lot of reasons that I don't want them to promote him for. Because there's stuff that he does that I don't like. I don't want him to do. I think that he's very clearly becoming a vessel for Zionism. He always has been. That's going to continue. But we're getting a trade-off. That continues, but we get the increased territory expansion opportunities as a consequence of him being the president versus what would be available to us were Biden to be reelected. I think we ultimately win in both cases, but I would just prefer the Trump version. I think it lines up better. Your mileage may vary. Charles Haywood says the vibe shift is real, but the left will never accept it. They never do. When the vibe shift is reified by a Trump victory, they will go all in because they cannot abide it being shown that history has no arrow. Which means we need to be prepared for that, whatever that means for you individually. You need to be prepared for that. You can't let that time arise and then spend all of your time complaining that it's happening. People are predicting it right now. And yet I know come February or whenever some great overreach by the regime happens and everyone's going to be sitting around and crying about how unjust and evil it is and we could just get these people out of our society. When you could be busy right now contributing in some way to mitigating or undermining or weakening any attempt that they might make. You just have to have the stones. You have to have some sort of belief, hope, optimism. If you don't have that, that's fine. Just shut up and go away. We don't want to hear from you. You need to go work on yourself. Go build yourself into someone who can positively take advantage of anything for anything other than just bitching and complaining that people aren't playing your game. People are becoming more and more inclined to play your game. The biggest thing that's holding them back from playing your game is you. Your presence. The fact that you just give everyone the ick. I know that the king-pilled audience isn't necessarily full of a lot of those types. I think there's some out there. I see you guys commenting. I see the replies on Twitter. I know the people are watching. You're the ones I'm talking to. Those of you who need to hear this. We need men. They're in severely short supply. And there's way too many guys who think having a dick makes them a man. You're just the flip side of the trannies. Having a dick doesn't make you a man. Knowing what to do with it and how to channel your inner vril, that's what makes you a man. Let's see here. Which one of these do I want to touch on next? Let's go with this one first. I can't remember if I read this tweet yesterday on the show, this tweet from Meta Prime, but I'm going to read it here now because it ties into what we're talking about. He says, seeing a lot of lib influencers suddenly spouting dissident right talking points. Let's make a few things clear so you don't fall for the con. You will know the fake post-left influencers because they will only talk about these topics: crime statistics, illegal immigration, anti-white racism, modern economic hardship, and dating discourse. But will completely avoid the following: spirituality, virtue not degeneracy, natural human over transhuman, local building of parallel systems, and natalism. Notice that all of their talking points will be rage bait. Aren't you mad, Anon, about how unfair X thing is? They will never talk solutions outside of maybe telling you to get ripped, run crypto scams, and fuck sluts. Degenerate doomer vitalism. If the content you consume is not making you better, stop reading it. Stop reading it. Don't fall for the rage bait. Find God. Hold yourself to a high standard of virtue. Lift, train, and find a team of guys. Build a business. Get involved in your community at a local level. And if you can't do that where you are, move. Start a family and have a ton of kids. Become someone people respect and don't want to fuck with. In this time of societal and ethical collapse, do not use other people's weakness and the challenges of our time as an excuse to fall prey to your base material desires. That is the filter. I'm going to read that one more time. In this time of societal and ethical collapse, do not use other people's weakness and the challenges of our time as an excuse to fall prey to your base material desires. If you want to secure a future for your bloodline, you do so through hard work, responsibility, and faith in God. There are no shortcuts. Now, predictably, he got a bunch of replies from people who honed in on this part of the tweet here. And this is very ironic because by honing in on this part of the tweet here and spurging at him about it, these guys are just reinforcing his point. They're identifying themselves as actually being fake post-left influencers. They say, oh, you're saying these things don't matter? No, obviously, of course these things matter. Are you retarded? But this is only part of the story. This is the fruit. This is the tree. The evidence of these, the crime statistics, the illegal immigration, the anti-white racism, the modern economic hardship, the dating discourse, all of these things are the fruit of this, the absence of this tree. This tree here is weak and frail and rotten, and it's producing shitty fruit. If people don't have your best interests in mind, they want you to focus on the fact that you're picking shitty fruit rather than the fact that your tree sucks. If you want better fruit, you need a better tree. The people who actually care about you are the ones who are going to talk to you about this. And I don't care what their opinions are on individual issues. If they grasp this concept, that the way out is through these things, through building virtue and not degeneracy, then I don't care about their individual issues here or there. We're not just rationalists that need to rationally argue every last little point and get 100% agreement across the line before we can align with someone, before we can work with them or cooperate with them or try to build a society with them. You will never have a functioning society made up of people who are 100% aligned on 100% of things. That society would suck. That's a feminine society. A masculine society will necessarily have disagreements. There will be fights. The borders are going to be constantly needing to be reinforced. A masculine society creates lots of opportunities for men to be masculine, for men to establish those boundaries. They have to establish those boundaries through rubbing against each other. That's be a good Perry Abbasi tweet. Iron sharpening iron. That's what a masculine society is going to be like. People aren't going to 100% disagree with you. If you're bogging yourself down on these issues, well, this guy here, he may have said this thing, but look at this other part of this other person he met, or this other thing that he believes, or this other policy he supports, or you're just a fucking shitty libertarian, man. We don't need all that shit. It doesn't help anything. I'm going to be having a conversation next week with Meta Prime and Dimes, where we're going to be going into detail about this issue. We've got a lot of other stuff we're going to get into as well, but I love this term, degenerate doomer vitalism. If you're making your ethos just running around complaining about these things and yelling at people for not complaining about them in the right way, you're participating in this degenerate doomer vitalism. You are post-left. No matter what you want to tell yourself about yourself. Here's an interesting observation here from another good friend of the show, Kryptos. He says, so he's quoting this guy here. The rest of the subject isn't really super relevant. This guy just says, a central challenge for mainstream parties and a central part of any strategy for weakening the extreme right is finding a position on immigration that doesn't simply involve telling voters that they're wrong. And a democracy, dismissing public opinion often ends poorly. He's making a good observation. You could disagree with the rest of his premises. You could say, yeah, if you want to weaken the extreme right, I mean, actually, weakening you're not going to weaken the extreme right by finding a position that doesn't simply involve telling voters that they're wrong. But he's starting to get there. He's directionally getting there. Yes, limiting immigration is very, very popular. This is not an extreme right position, and this is the point that Kryptos makes. He says, here's the problem. They keep using this term mainstream parties while talking about how out of touch they are with the general public as a whole. What this means in practical terms is that the political and social elites are no longer in touch with the mainstream. This is what we've been saying here. These people live in a bubble of their own creation. They're not in touch with reality anymore. That's why they're operating incoherently. Let them. They're going to crash and burn themselves. We just extract ourselves from them. They're not in touch with the mainstream anymore. The mainstream is closer to us than it is to them, which says more about them than it does about the mainstream. Elites in political, economic, and social circles have embraced policies, mass immigration, the radical sexual revolution, that are out of step with the mainstream. The mainstream voter knows and experiences firsthand that mass immigration is a direct threat. Mass immigration is a threat to their economic position through wage arbitrage, which benefits the radical ideological elites, and it destabilizes their culture, society, and way of life. Simply put, historic populations and peoples want them gone. Mainstream voters want their countries to go back to normal, the way it was 30 years ago before mass immigration. To the radical ideological elites, this seems scary and right-wing. But here is a truth that is lost on today's elites. The mainstream likes social stability. The mainstream is not terribly interested in creating a global utopia. The mainstream just wants to get married, raise a family, and provide for them more or less comfortably. They want this to be the concern of their elites, not some grand social engineering project. There's great demand now for elites who will offer this. Do you get that point? There is great demand among the mainstream for people, for elites, for leaders who will offer them the opportunity to get married, raise a family, and provide for them more or less comfortably. You can tie yourself on all sorts of knots, rationalizing all the exceptions. But at its basis, these things, these simple things that we want, are very popular. It's up to us to know how to sell them and how to put ourselves in the position to benefit from their implementation and to be responsible for their implementation. They want their political and economic leaders to care more about their own people than the bottom line or the foreigner. And here's the hard part. The mainstream want their leaders to care about the people, care more about the people than they do about themselves, or at least the appearance of it. The elites believe they are the mainstream when in fact it is they that are the radicals. They look at the political parties to which the true mainstream are gravitating as far right, but the people see these parties as the mainstream. The far right is being mainstreamed. And you can choose how you want to view this. You can view this as the mainstream is absorbing the far right, or the far right is taking over the mainstream. Whichever one you choose to operate on will be manifested into reality. So if you want to view it as the far right taking over the mainstream, that's what's happening. You just have to let it happen. The elites have made this problem themselves out of touch, consumed by ideological pretensions. Through their radicalism, they have in their minds made the opinions of the normal mainstream people into something scary and verboten. This only cements the appeal. Because something that is outside the fringes, something that is off limits, is naturally attractive to people. People are curious about it. This is why the freaks on the fringes are always the ones who are ahead of the rest of the society. Because the closer you get to the middle, the more you want to experience the fringes. This is why elite circles tend to have some of the most degenerate, perverted people in them. They've experienced everything the mainstream, the center, has to offer. So now they want to start going out to the fringes. They can. They're the ones who can afford to. This becomes kind of like a what would you call it? Like a deal with the devil, sort of. This is the way human societies are going to function. You need the people at the top have to have that creative impulse, that impulse to go out and be curious and find what's more. They need to be able to sustain and cultivate that while also preventing the excesses of that. This is the role of the king. This is the role of the king, archetypally manifested in every man. He's the one who has to bridge the gap between the center and the fringe. He's the only one who can do it. He's both the first citizen, the one who represents all other citizens, and he's also the first citizen, the single, unique one. So he's both the center and the fringe at the same time. And then on a fractal manner, this has to be manifested in the spirit of each individual man. For his own domain, he has to serve that function. And as he serves that function, he begins manifesting this kingly behavior into society, which is naturally viral. Humans gravitate toward this. They want it. They want to see it. They want to embody it. They want to see it embodied. They want to participate in it. We have a natural longing for this because we are created in the image and likeness of God. As you begin embodying it, more people begin embodying it. And it ripples out until it hits a tipping point. And then most likely, you have a time of great peace and prosperity and plenty, which ultimately sows the seeds for the future malaise and degeneracy. And round through the cycle we go again. The ancient people understood the cyclical nature to society. Lately, we tend to see things linearly. This is a modern Western thing. It's actually introduced by Christianity, but Christianity doesn't even, that's kind of a bit of a westernized emphasis, is viewing time as strictly a linear process. In reality, time is both cyclical and linear simultaneously. Which, interestingly, if you blend those two movements together, you get a vortex. And as you start studying vortexes, you'll find some very interesting things. That may be something we get into more in the future. Let me see what some of you guys are saying in here. Taylor Brown, in other words, it's a great day to have a great day. That's right, man. Joshua Ham, first rule of manliness, don't be a fag. Correct. Don't be a fag. Moral Meerkat says, if we can function alongside degens, we can certainly function alongside decent people. Right. Yeah, you have to be able to sense the decency in another person. Regardless of what degenerate thing they happen to believe. Once upon a time, you believed degenerate stuff too. And you thought you were a decent person. A very useful heuristic when interacting with other people is to assume that in their mind, they're always right. Assume that if you were operating from their perspective, you would believe what they believe. They are correct from their perspective. Every single war that was ever fought was fought between two sides who both believed they were right and the other side was wrong. This isn't easy to do. It's hard because you want to operate from your perspective. And you want to reify your perspective. But once you begin operating from the perspective of their perspective, it's like a superpower. You can get anything you want because you're giving them what they want. You could see into the future because you can see what they want, so you can see where they're going to move. And you could get there first and bring them along. Now they're indebted to you. You can't get carried away with this because there is such a thing as like sociopathic manipulation, but this is how they do it. This is how sociopaths manipulate. I've never really bought the idea that sociopaths are like incapable of seeing someone else's perspective. It's more like the opposite. It's more like they can seamlessly see anyone's perspective at any time. If anything, they don't have their own perspective. It's like the inversion of what the truth supposedly is. Josiah, what's a fractal? Patrick, he's not actually asking. He knows what a fractal is. Okay, so on this here, one thing I forgot to share with that tweet from Meta Prime was this quote tweet that I liked. He said, "This is true." This is Jay Coriolanus. He says, "This is true. It also shows how much we are winning. Grifting is a form of mimetic patronage if gatekept correctly." Right. When the grifters start grifting on your brand, you should take that as a sign that you're winning and operate as such. Don't go fight the grifters and tell them to stop grifting on you. Let them do it. You're getting free advertising. Let them go stir things up ahead of you. And just follow along and take advantage of whatever they stir up. So this is the clip that I was going to share that I know that some of you in here are probably not going to really care for seeing. But hey, man, when a guy gets something right, I got to acknowledge that he got something right. Let's share the screen here. So here's Big Bear. Here's what he has to say.
The whole accepting responsibility and accepting blame is how you get authority. And there's people in this chat that I've seen for a while and they're still not understanding it. Yes, okay. The woman is responsible for feminism if the woman is in control, which creates the feminism. Maybe I got to slow it down. You know, sometimes I can get riled up and really lay things out too fast. Okay. Let's say someone goes, "Oh, feminism ruined marriages." And the men go, women did the feminism. And then the women go, it was us. We did the feminism. What does that mean? It means the woman is in charge, which is what feminism is. If the man says it's because we failed to lead our women properly, we were too immoral, we accepted promiscuity and we put them on the pill because we were perverted. And because of that, they stopped following our lead. It is on us. We created the feminism, so we must solve the feminism. Women made the choice to get jobs and act like men and scissor each other in a Subaru because the men had failed them. failed them as leaders. Do you see the difference?
Back here, there's something here that I want to replay right here.
And the men go, women did the feminism. And then the women go, it was us. We did the feminism. What does that mean? It means the woman is in charge.
Right there. There's a parallel here to what happened in Eden. So the woman says, oh, it's the feminism. We're in charge. And the man acquiesces to that. That's the moment that feminism is created. Feminism is created the moment the men acquiesce to it and say, yes, women, you are in charge. We turn over the responsibility to you. We turn over the authority to you. That's how feminism is created. Feminism is created by men. The women don't create it because the men could say no, and it would not be created. There would be no feminism if the men said no. The feminism comes into being when the men rubber stamp it through their own passivity or inactivity or sniffing their own farts or whatever they're doing. This happens to be the case for literally everything. The only reason things come to be is because men give their stamp of approval for them to come to be. And there's a lot of quote unquote men out there who want to sell you on the notion that all of this anti-masculine degeneracy is something that you are a victim of, that's been thrust upon you. But if you rubber stamp that, if you grant that as a reality and say, yes, that is true, you have just ceded authority to women. Or to blacks, or to Jews, or to whomever. You could choose not to rubber stamp that and not accept that narrative. No, that's not true. That's not going to happen. That's not going to be the case. I'm putting my foot down. Adam was given this opportunity in the garden. The Lord asked him, what happened? He's, oh, the woman you gave me, she did it. It's your fault, actually. It's you and her. You guys put me in a bad spot. I'm just the victim here, man. What was I supposed to do? He was supposed to say no. He was supposed to be a man. But he didn't say no. He participated. And then he shirked the responsibility. And thus he was cursed. So to bear the curse of Adam is to take that responsibility. And when you take that responsibility, you are granted authority. If you want the authority, you have to take the responsibility. And the longer that we sit around and shirk the responsibility, push it off onto someone else, it was the Protestants, or it was the Jews, or the Zionists, or the women, or the demons, or it was God himself. You are just disempowering yourself. Like the game is laid out so clearly. It's so obvious. This is why I said in my other tweet that this truth is simple, but it's hard. It's simple, it's straightforward. It's very easy to see once you see it. But it's hard to do because we're weak. We've been weakened by our own poor choices. We've been weakened by our own degeneracy. And so it's hard. It's hard to do the simple thing. But the simple thing is take responsibility and accept the authority that comes with that, and then properly use that authority to say no next time. Sometimes saying no is saying yes. Like Charles Padilla, when he was on the show here, he talked about what he tells young men, that you need to just be yourself. Like don't allow yourself to just if I think the example he used was like board games or sports or whatever. If you don't like something, don't hesitate to say you don't like it. That doesn't mean you have to get in a fight over it. It doesn't mean you need to bludgeon other people into not liking it as well. But when you say, I don't like that, you're stamping yourself onto reality, And you're providing data points to other people. Maybe become useful at some point for them. I never thought about it this way, and I've kind of found myself lately embodying that. And just in different opportunities, just expressing my stance on something or expressing my opinion when normally I might not have. And you could do this in a controlled, neutral way. You're not just being pissy. You're not just trying to start a fight. You can also do it by saying, I don't like that thing. I like this thing. Here's this thing. I like this. And not being ashamed of it. I like the thing that I like. I have good reasons for liking it. You don't have to like it, but I like it. And I'm going to tell you that I like it because I want to find someone else who likes it as well. And we could build a relationship on that. These are like really basic human functions that for a wide variety of environmental and spiritual reasons have been kind of frittered away from us in the autism maxing that is society now. But takes a bite. I like that, Jeffrey Dahmer. Just get used to asserting yourself onto the world. And maybe you've been weak and wimpy and passive aggressive and soft and just kind of let people push you around. Just going with the flow. You need to reassert yourself. Find ways to reassert yourself. No, I don't like that. Hey, I like this. I want more of this. But doing it in a calm, civilized, stable manner. Start flexing those muscles. Because this is one of the major ways that men, the collective masculine spirit has become weak and passive, is conflict avoidance and I just don't care about anything. It's not cool to care. It is cool to care. Make caring cool again. It's good to care about stuff. Speaking of, here's another quote from this guy, Old Books guy. He's got some good quotes that have dropped in my algorithm lately. Here's one from Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson explains why not pursuing your interests is actually a sin. Quoting, interest is a spirit beckoning from the unknown, a spirit calling from outside the walls of society. Pursuit of interest means journeying outside the protective walls of childhood dependence and adolescent group identification and returning to rejuvenate society. This means that pursuit of individual interest, development of true individuality, is equivalent to identification with the hero. Such identification renders the world bearable despite its tragedies. This is the antidote to suffering. One of the antidotes to suffering, part of the antidote to suffering, is pursuing interests. Your interests are like a voice calling you towards something that you need to pursue. If you've been pushing those interests off, start pursuing them. Obviously, I wouldn't say to follow the Jeffrey Dahmer route. I'm sure you'd find some women who would like you if you did. But there's something that's beautiful and pure that I think I don't see it enough. And maybe I'm not looking in the right places. But I know that I had this spirit kind of beaten out of me by the last couple of decades of experience with life, obsessing with all the happenings, all the goings on, and not creating and building things, not pursuing the calling. It's kind of like we're in this perpetual crisis mode. So we have to put everything else on hold so we can manage the crisis and deal with the crisis. But as long as we're sitting here and managing the crisis and dealing with the crisis, whatever that means, it's like time has been put on hold. Time needs to move forward. It's backing up. You can start feeling the tension and the pressure of time backing up. We've stopped creating things. We've stopped producing things. We've stopped making beautiful things. We've stopped studying the universe, exploring. It's one of the things I love about Elon. Just the simple fact that he projects this image of launching fucking 40-foot buildings into the sky. That simple thing alone is transformative to the human spirit if it's allowed to persist. I want more people to think, hey, how can I get a fucking 100-foot or 100-story building and launch it into the sky? Or whatever else. Large projects, building things, like building the cathedrals. These were projects that took centuries. And now today we have the technological capacity to do it way easier, but we don't even do it. When people do it, nobody cares. Nobody pays attention. This isn't like there's no sense of glory and honor. Again, if these things that are true and beautiful and good don't exist, the only solution for us is to make them exist. To bring them into reality. Josiah says, no one builds anything when they're anxious and afraid. The constant crises is a spectacle provided by the enemy. Do not be afraid. Any building that you can make, any building you can do, will combat this sense of anxiety and fear. It'll combat it in yourself. You won't have time. You're too busy building something. You won't have time to be anxious and fearful. And you'll begin projecting that spirit onto others. People catch that bug. We start building. You know, there's a thesis that I've been kind of working on lately that I've mentioned several times, and I think this is probably one of my least popular, one of the things that people agree with me the least, and that's fine. We'll see who's right eventually. Maybe we won't. Maybe we won't live that long. We'll see. But I've come to the opinion that we're not experiencing the end of the American Empire. We're still in the infancy. The American Empire hasn't even been born yet. And what we're experiencing now is actually the death pangs, the death throes of the British Empire. These sort of things are kind of fuzzy because it's not like there's one day where empires aren't the sort of thing that they're not built in a day and they don't die in a day. You can't just attribute a particular date to the birth or the death of an empire. Any date that you did attribute to it would be just sort of arbitrary. Like we're picking this time here because it corresponded with this particular event. But there was a lot that went into the build up to that point or the downfall to that point. So these things they're fluid and they overlap. They're like human generations. Really, they're kind of the same thing. One empire, especially once you hit a functionally global scale, each empire necessarily births the next one. And then there's a period of time where there's a struggle over whose empire is which empire is going to persist, the parent empire or the child empire. When is the child going to overtake the parent? And that's what we've been experiencing. We've had I suppose you could say like the juvenile, the infant, and then the child, and then the juvenile American Empire. But when people talk about the American Empire, they're talking about like the globally dominant power, the single sovereign unit from which everything else flows. And the American Empire has not existed that way. It's had the appearance of it for something measly like 75-ish years. But what I would contend is that the past somewhere 75, 100 years, again, these things are kind of blurry, kind of murky. But this period of time has been the elderly form of the British Empire paying off America to be the muscle, to be the front facing. It's like the mafia don who's dying and it doesn't want anybody to know that he's dying. So he's hired his son to be the front face of everything. But ultimately, the son is reporting back to his father. But now his father is dying. His father has gone into a coma. And there's some people who know. There's some people who know that this has been the case. They're aware of this arrangement. And so now everyone's jockeying to see who's going to be the actual empire. Who is going to control, we have to depart the analogy a little bit here, but who's going to control the entity that becomes the American empire, the adult empire version of America. There's a lot of reasons why I think this is the case. But I guess first of all, the baseline assumption is that America is going to be the dominant force. Whatever the thing is called America is going to be the dominant force in the world. I believe it's going to happen in more of a multipolar way, but there's going to be a big brother on the block. The one that is ultimately the most able to direct its own interests, irrespective of how many allies it has or how those allies are constituted. And I believe the U.S. is going to be this landmass. Whoever controls what's happening on this landmass is ultimately going to be the sovereign of the world. In large part because of geographic reasons. People have detailed this extensively. The nature of the positioning of North America makes it very easy to control the borders. Very easy to transport goods all throughout. The Mississippi River is a marvel. And having all of this coastline on the outside and on the inside of the country, all the different natural resources, all the varying wide ranges of terrain, all the infrastructure that's been built here. These are all a number of reasons why I believe it's going to be somewhere between 20 and 100 years for this to bear itself out. But America is going to emerge even more clearly the dominant sovereign power, and it's actually going to be Americans directing American interests. Now, the debate over what America is or is going to be is I'd say like a follow-on conversation from this. Because I'm making the prediction that it's going to be the entity called America that is the sovereign, that isn't being controlled financially by Atlanticist elites who hail back to London. And it's not going to be Zionists, which is itself something that was birthed out of the British Empire's desire to protect and sustain itself. It's going to be Americans. The question is, which Americans? What kind of American are you? This I would say is the task before us. Is ensuring that we have a say in that conversation. I think there's plenty of allies, plenty of potential allies who believe in this vision. They may differ in what America is going to look like, but they agree that they want America to be the sovereign. To not just be the hired muscle that protects the British sea lanes to maintain the British free market system with global trade. No, America is going to become much more insular and much more of a true sovereign. Because America can afford to. Both because of the American spirit that's still latent, because of the geographic reasons, because of the natural resource reasons. The real debate is going to be who is going to control America as America controls everything else. And by controls, I don't mean is explicitly maintaining control of. I mean controls by dint of being the biggest kid on the block. One thing that led me to this conclusion was learning, and I can't remember where I learned it, but I learned that Russia actually participated in the American Civil War, which I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd never really thought about Russia really before, Soviet Union, basically, USSR. Shortly before that, there was some czars and, whatever. But then I learned that the Russians had intervened in the American Civil War, which led me to question, well, why was that? Why did Russia intervene in the American Civil War? What interest did Russia have in the American Civil War? Because they intervened on behalf of the Union. So here's the story of it. I'd mentioned this before, and a couple people said they'd never heard of it as well. So, hopefully you've never heard of this, and this is news to you. Let's make this a little bigger so you guys can see. Okay, so this is from the U.S. Naval Institute. Civil War visit by the Tsar's Navy. Even during the thick of America's defining internecine clash, the politics of the old world mingled with the new, as bi-coastal Russian fleet sojourns proved in 1863 and 1864. This is written in October 11. It's October of 2011. It's a long piece, and I'd encourage you to go read the whole thing. It's very interesting. So it says, the Russian fleet has come out of the Baltic and are now in New York. Gideon Welles, President Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of the Navy, reported on 23 September 1863. God bless the Russians. Secretary Welles was probably not the only U.S. cabinet officer ever to urge God's blessings on the Russians. Opportunities for that benediction came again during the world wars of the 20th century. But he almost certainly was the first, since diplomatic relations had been established in 1809 between the imperial court in St. Petersburg and the fledgling Republican government in Washington. So to this point, America had been a network of colonies. And these colonies earned their independence from the mother country, ostensibly. But the mother country didn't want them to be independent. They didn't want to lose this great pearl of their colonial empire. So Britain had a strong incentive to prevent America from developing, particularly given the geographic and natural resource realities of America with respect to the British Isles. They had a very strong incentive for America to not be able to develop industrial manufacturing capacity. Because the proper way to maintain this empire, the empire the British set up, was that all the industrialization and all the manufacturing was all done in Britain. And the colony's responsibility was to send all their raw goods to Britain. Britain manufactures everything and then exports it. So when the Civil War arose, the British had a very strong incentive to support the South, because the South was an agrarian society. The South was not nearly as industrialized and mechanized. So the South had the proper relationship to Britain that Britain wanted in its colonies. It'd been a short period of time. Britain doesn't just want to let go of their colonies. They want to try to retain this control. But at the same time, there's realities of trying to execute wars across an ocean and trying to maintain people there who are now have this uniquely American spirit of independence and go west, young man. That's something that's uniquely American. And I think it in part has to do with the spirit of the land. There's something in the land that motivates this spirit. It's also, there's just a natural selection effect of the people who are willing to go west in the first place to the New World would naturally breed people who are more inclined to be that way. So you get a selection bias that the people who came here in the first place and settled this country from Europe were the selection of Europeans who were inclined to do something like that. So they bred that spirit into their descendants. So Britain had a strong incentive for the South to they didn't want the South to win the Civil War. They wanted the Civil War to end in a détente where American power would be fractured. But for a variety of different political reasons, they couldn't directly intervene in this way. So the South was reaching out and courting European countries to try to help us out here. On humanitarian reasons or economic reasons or political reasons, or they have all these, nothing's ever like a completely unilateral along a single axis. But you have, in 1809, you have this fledgling network of federalist states that are still not seen as a world power. They're still up-and-comers. And you've got this imperial court in St. Petersburg, and they're like, hey, let's be friends. Because St. Petersburg was engaged in all sorts of different machinations of power politics with Britain in Europe, in and around Europe. You could just look at a map. You could see geographically why this would be the case. If you consider Britain and all of their colonies out to the Far East and their desire to maintain contact with that and needing to have waterways to pass through and land bridges to pass through and access their colonies and not be completely cut off from them, then there's direct conflict with the Russians because of that. So there was a strong incentive for this network of colonies that have just, in their minds, overthrown the yoke of British power, their mother, the mother country that birthed them. They're establishing their own independence, and so there's a natural alignment here with the USSR or with the Russian Empire. As would eventually become clear to some, however, the motive behind the unexpected appearance of Tsarist Navy squadrons in New York and San Francisco during the third autumn of the Civil War was much less generous than it initially appeared to Secretary Wells. That motive had little to do with support for the Union in the bloody contest between the North and South, and much to do with the tensions in Europe. As America's Civil War loomed, the secessionist South's leadership was absolutely confident the new Confederate government would receive European diplomatic recognition. A confidence born of the conviction that Southern cotton was the essential raw material for continued British industrialization, trade, and prosperity, and that England's as well as France's and other continental powers' appetite for the South's cotton was insatiable. The expected recognition would be a triumph culminating, if necessary, with the Royal Navy punching through any federal blockade of Confederate ports to guarantee access to cotton. It all turned out to be one of history's great and tragic political misjudgments. The coming war would impoverish the Southern states and retard their economic development for a century. On 13 May 1861, a month into the American fratricide, London issued a neutrality proclamation, according the South belligerent status, but nothing more. Despite their own sympathies for the Confederacy, the other European capitals followed London's stay-out-of-it lead. But while much of Europe reluctantly restrained a natural enthusiasm for the Confederacy, Russia openly supported the Union. The sentiment was made explicit in an extraordinary manifesto written by Foreign Minister Prince Alexander Gorchakov for Tsar Alexander II and delivered by the Russian ambassador in Washington to Secretary of State William Seward. Gorchakov's letter, published in the New York Times on 9 September 1861, noted that the two countries formed a natural community of interests and sympathies, and that Russia viewed the United States as an essential element of the international equilibrium, for all of the reasons that I was just describing. That Russia and the United States shared a warm friendship during the Civil War is a fascinating irony given the history to come. The relationship began tentatively in the 18th century and grew during the 19th, as each party adhered consistently to a policy of non-intervention in the affairs of the other, and both frequently exchanged reassurances that this policy continued to govern. While the Russians declined to support an initiative by Napoleon III for European mediation of the American Civil War, the Americans reciprocated by firmly rejecting entreaties by other European states to join them in pressuring Russia over a revolt bedeviling the Tsar. In this rosy glow of mutual appreciation, some in the United States believed that Russia under Alexander II would continue to modernize and liberalize, even eventually becoming democratic. As Harper's Weekly observed, the analogies between the American and the Russian people have too often been described to need further explanation here. Russia, like the United States, is a nation of the future. Its capabilities are only just being developed. Its national destiny is barely shaped. Its very institutions are in their cradle and have yet to be modeled to fit advancing civilization and the spread of intelligence. Like the United States, Russia is in the agonies of a terrible transition. The Russian serfs, like the American Negroes, are receiving their liberty. And the Russian boyars, like the Southern slave owners, are mutinous at the loss of their property. When this great problem shall have been solved and the Russian people shall consist of 100 million intelligent, educated human beings, it is possible that Russian institutions will have been welded by the force of civilization into a similarity with ours. It's fascinating to kind of put yourself in the mind of an American at that time, someone speaking for official American institutions like this, and to think of them thinking of Russia that way and looking at the parallels they're drawing to each other. None of these different conflicts were happening in a vacuum. You've got this fledgling network of colonies that have just overthrown their yoke, so they're becoming a power player on the world stage. So these different European and Asian influences were basically like, you can be on our side. You're getting the whole global power play landscape is being laid out. So there's a battle for who's going to have these new colonies be their ally. Who are they going to ally with? Because this is going to tilt the playing field in one direction or the other. During his reign, Alexander II was celebrated as a great reformer. Measured against the standards of the dozen or so Romanov tsars and tsarinas who preceded him, he was. But despite Alexander's historic emancipation of the serfs in February of 1861 and some tentative gestures toward further liberalization, Russia in the 1860s was still an autocracy. A January 1863 mutiny of Polish draftees in the Russian army capped off a revolt that had begun 2 years earlier and had grown to challenge the scope of Alexander's control of Russian-occupied Poland and Lithuania. As the English, French, and Austrian governments in the spring of 1863 pressured St. Petersburg over the Polish situation, they also tried to recruit the United States to join them in their protestations. But Secretary of State Seward disappointed them by responding that he, quote, trusted the liberality, sagacity, and magnanimity of the Tsar to solve the problems underlying the violence erupting on Russia's periphery. Wary of potential European reprisals over Poland, the Tsar and his foreign minister decided to relocate the Russian fleet from its home ports, where it might be confined and defeated if war erupted. Relocation also could put Russia's men of war in good position to raid British commerce should war come. American harbors, where Alexander had reason to expect his ships would be welcomed, and where their visit might be usefully misunderstood, offered an ideal alternative to remaining homeported and vulnerable. Moreover, prior correspondence had established that American shipyard facilities at Brooklyn, New York, and Mare Island, California, would be available to support the vessels certain to need maintenance during any extended deployment. So then it goes on to describe the actual happenings of it, and basically, the Russian ships just showed up on the two coasts of the Americas and then just hung out there for, I think it was like 8 months or something like that. And the implication here of this was, number one, Russia is benefiting from being able to, if things break out into open hostilities in Europe, then not all of their forces are going to be conglomerated in one area. They've got them spread out a little bit. But they're also serving as a statement that we're sitting here and we're going to help. We're going to put our thumb on the scale and dictate the outcome of this war in America, because they wanted the Union to win on the Union's terms so that America would become more powerful and become united into a single unit that they could then turn to their aid in combating British imperial influences. So all of this context makes the later happenings, all the Gilded Age of America, where America rapidly industrializes after the Civil War, and then expanding into the early 1900s, you have the establishment of the Federal Reserve. And you can go listen to Jay Dyer or whoever else you want, go into the details of all the British secret societies and where they came from and how they're influencing Marx and how they're influencing the rise of communism in the Soviet communism. These are all exports of British intelligence. And the way it reads to me is like Britain was seeking to maintain an economic stranglehold on the colonies. Then Britain was overthrown there and cast aside, and they had to figure out kind of on the fly, okay, what are we going to do next? Well, we've got these other contingency plans that we've been working on for using intelligence to destabilize European and near European interests to maintain our own economic interests. We're this tiny little network of islands that is expanding ourselves out through a naval empire to try to control the entire world. But they didn't have the native resources to be able to actually function as a fully independent, strong empire on those terms. So they had to extend the lifespan of their empire through espionage and through financial means. And this then formed a natural relationship between the British intelligence interests, which includes their all the wealthy benefactors in their society, and the Zionist interests in Israel. Because Britain now wants to have an outpost to manage their interests across this land bridge into the Far East. And it just so happens that now Britain can use these same influences to project power and subversively control the American beast. So now the American beast, instead of being its own sovereign entity, it serves as the attack dog, and the British Empire can hide behind it. Oh, this is the Americans. Oh man, we got to get the Americans to chill out. But just study British intelligence throughout the 1900s. And the way that American intelligence was built through direct cooperation and collaboration with British intelligence. And then immediately you have a British-seeded phenomenon in Soviet communism. And then all of these guys, these radicals from Soviet communism, they all get thrown out and they go to the U.S. They come to the U.S. and they become the neoconservatives. You have the Trotskyites take over the Conservative Party as neoconservatives and direct the interests of the American national security state that it uses to govern, quote unquote, as an empire, and sets them to align with the other British asset that they have a common interest in, which is Israel. So now you have the American, quote unquote, empire enters into both of these major world wars and has the way people typically read this is this was America essentially colonizing Europe. But it wasn't America. These weren't American interests that were directing this. American people aren't controlling this. The ones that are operating as proxies. And now, so fast forward all the way to today. And you see these moves within the American commercial banking sector and the Fed, as guys like Tom Luongo and Phil Gibson have detailed, showing how there's a nationalist move within the American financial sector. The Fed, this change from LIBOR to SOFR with the Fed and the way they've like regrounded the American dollar in American economic activity, while at the same time, the petrodollar officially just expired and is not being re-upped. I think the official expiration is more symbolic than anything else. But we're moving into a new economic era now, where there's a rising swell of American interests who want America to exist for Americans. It's all mixed up with people who have other different interests, and there's an overlap in the people who are historically coming from largely Zionist circles or giving the Zionist party lines, who are also beginning to talk a lot about how America needs to be its own sovereign entity and we don't need to be beholden to all these other different things. I believe the trajectory of history is moving toward America becoming a true sovereign power for the first time. I don't know what that America is going to look like. I don't know exactly who's going to control it. I think that's yet to be determined. But there are some things that are determined about the future. And one of those is, I believe, the inevitable rise of America to actually be a sovereign imperial power for the first time, not simply as a proxy of the dying British Empire. So it's going to look different. It's going to function differently. We're probably going to have a world of multipolarity for quite a while, and it may even be that America is just the biggest dog on the block in a multipolar world because of the circumstance, the intersecting circumstances of geography and national spirit and economic interests and sheer number of people and all these different things. All these things are congealing to form the actual birth of the American empire. And these same old European powers don't want a powerful American empire for the same reasons they haven't wanted them for the last 200 years. They're still fighting against it. And that fight against the rise of America as a sovereign entity has completely destroyed Europe. This is the record of the British Empire, is that they've completely destroyed Europe. Now, Europe is starting to have some of its own right-wing nationalist movements that are popping up all over the place. And the reality of these sorts of things is as some of them begin to take hold, there will be increasing demand for others. You might say, Trump was a failure. In a lot of ways, he was. And he probably still will be. But the spiritual reality of what Trump manifested and inspired has gone on to manifest and inspire in others, in Bukele and Milei and all the different right-wing movements that are popping up across Europe. And of course, every single one of these is getting targeted and subverted, and they're fucking fighting for civilization. It's a civilizational level war. So there's influences all over the place that are all trying to twist things to their own ends. But I'm describing the playing field as I see it. Within this context, then, it's very interesting to see some of the biggest boogeymen out there, BlackRock and Citadel, are forming a new stock exchange. I see this as likely a we should get Sean Wieland on here to talk to us about this. I see this as likely like a pressure release valve. They're basically just like, we got to keep the Ponzi scheme going, so we got to start a new one and offload everything over there. But the fact of the matter is that this is falling in line with a long pattern of more and more economic weight moving to Texas. Because this is the other part of my prediction here, that Texas will be the seat of whatever this sovereign American imperial power is. All of the economic and political power is going to move to Texas over the next somewhere between 20 and 100 years. People will look back on the days where Washington, D.C. was the seat of power in the United States and be like, wow, that was kind of crazy. Yeah, Washington, D.C. and New York and everything. That's where all the hubs of trade and commerce and the financialization of the economy is all coming from over there. Well, now you're getting Silicon Valley is trying to move to Texas, and now you're getting New York financial interests are trying to move to Texas. They're all coming to Texas, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Again, geographic reasons, the coastline that Texas has, the access to the Mississippi, all the different resources, the vast land. And inevitably, all of these forces coming to Texas is going to mean Texas is not going to be redder and redder. Texas is going to get purple. It's getting purple. This is part of the seat of the empire is never going to be like the most, like hardcore based right wing, whatever, just natural human social patterns. But I do believe that this is going to become the new seat. And this move with the Texas Stock Exchange is another indication in that direction. Now, another interesting story related to this is the Jewish socialist female president of Mexico. And they've all had all their takes on it, and sure, I agree with lots of those. It's interesting. What's interesting to me about this is this how would you say this? As these movements are beginning to ripple among the different elite classes and they're projecting all their different things and all that, if what I'm saying is true, then I wonder to what extent the regime is beginning to cut its losses in the United States in certain domains and beginning to export its operations to Mexico. It's not like AMLO has been, he's absolutely like a neo-lib regime creature. But considering what's happening with Bukele and then the cartels and the extent to which Trump and his allies are likely going to want to go after the cartels, he has a lot of people behind him who the connection between the cartels and China and the China hawks who are with him, I think it's very likely that he's going to want to crack down on the cartels. The immigration issue, the importation of I just completely spaced on the drug. You guys will tell me. All of these things all happening at once means this. I think you have all the powers moving to Texas in America, and all the economic interest and fentanyl. Thank you. That's all moving to Texas, and now you've got this very obvious installation of a patsy of the purest of the regime class. And I wonder if this is indicative of where we've said for a long time, well, the Mexico and Canada are never going to try to invade the U.S. or whatever. So this is like one of the benefits of the American geographic location. But I wonder if we're going to start seeing a more hostile, belligerent relationship between Mexico and the U.S., with Mexico being used as a proxy of the same regime class. Because there's things they could probably do through Mexico that they can't do in the same way openly through the U.S. So this is like kind of like a measured retreat and retrenchment. That's kind of how, as I'm considering this prediction of mine, that's both of these news stories, the Texas Stock Exchange and the Jewish socialist female president of Mexico, is those things seem very related to me. And it reinforces what I believe. It reinforces my prediction for me. So anyways, I didn't expect to go for this long today, but hopefully you guys found that interesting. And this has been fun doing this week. Getting up in the morning, getting the show together, putting it out there. Got a few other little tweaks we need to make to it. And I've got, this afternoon, I'm going to be doing an interview with Disgraced Propagandist on Twitter, and his podcast will be talking about the PayPal Mafia. And then this evening, I will be on Meet the Based with Jason on the 2-Bit podcast, and Dissident Mama is going to be there, and I'm trying to remember who else. I'm not remembering off the top. Oh, I think Buck Johnson's going to be there. Then also just confirmed that Jason and I are going to be talking to Buck in the next couple of weeks, talking about some of these sorts of things. And then next week, I'm going to be doing an episode with Meta Prime and Dimes. So I'll drop those links as soon as I've got them made. Got lots more content coming for you guys. We got a few other interviews that I'm lining up as well. So should be a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Do me a favor, help me combat the demonetization, and because when something gets demonetized, it also limits the reach of the algorithm. So do me a favor and like the stream, share it with people, shout it out. Feel free to clip it up and anything if you'd like to. I'm not going to copyright claim anything. Beggars can't be choosers, right? And then, like I said, you can use super chats here anytime, and then you can become a member for $5 a month. You can become a member of the King Pill, or join the King Pill Discord at kingpill.com. And if you have other ways that you'd like to give us money, we are in the business of accepting money from people who want to give it to us. So if there's other ways that we don't have accessible right now that you'd like to give us, then let me know. Let me know how else. I'll set that up, and you can give us money in other ways as well. Volp's Persona says, I'm getting ads for your streams, by the way. Okay, that's good, I suppose. I've told it to do like the minimal number of ads, and so it's probably, they're not getting demonetized until after the stream. So we get a couple pennies. All right, thank you guys. I'll see you around. Show up this evening for the interview with the conversation on 2-Bit podcast on Meet the Based. We should have a really good one. So show up for that. It's going to be at 8 p.m. my time, 9 p.m. Eastern, I believe. Just look out for the 2-Bit podcast. You'll see it.